What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and this one will break down what's going on with Tesla stock and what you should be watching for going forward. I'm going to talk about the data that's dropping for tomorrow and over the next couple of days that will affect the whole market in Tesla, and what the news and technicals are suggesting for the share price moving forward. Before breaking things down about what's going on with Tesla and give you guys any price predictions and etc., I do have to mention a couple of things before starting though. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends very soon. Don't forget to check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. All right, so Tesla had a very interesting day. I predicted in the morning Tesla would get a nice pump to about 278 or so. We ended up pumping to about 277.5, so just short of my target. Then after that, we'd see a big rejection. I predicted we'd get a big rejection. Tesla would come down to at least 270 or so. And that's what also happened, except Tesla dropped a little bit lower than what I thought. And then after that, we just traded sideways as predicted. So very close prediction to what happened to Tesla. But the question is, what's going to happen to it moving forward? And at this point, you have to remember that Tesla is affected by volume. It's affected by manipulation, the short volume and all these other factors. Technical analysis plays a big role too, but those are not the only things that affect Tesla and the whole market. We also have to watch for some big data that drops quite often. And this time around, on Wednesday, we have some very, very big data dropping. CPIs coming out on Wednesday before the market opens. And this is going to be very important for Tuesday too. And I'm going to explain exactly why in just a few minutes. So if you're new to this, CPI is one of the most important inflationary measures that the Fed considers, actually. The Fed is going to be looking at this too. And core CPI, which is going to be CPI without food and energy, is very important as well. This data is going to be dropping on Wednesday before the market opens. So it's going to have a big effect on the market. But hear me out, it's going to come before the market opens, which means that lots of massive, capital management firms, institutions and hedge funds and even retail are going to be watching to secure profits and exit positions and reposition on Tuesday, because when the market closes on Tuesday, that's going to be your last chance to exit these options, these different positions, because you're not going to get another chance until after CPI is out. Now, this could depend on your brokerage and if you can trade during the pre-market, right? That's also another factor. But the majority of individuals and even institutions do not trade the most during the pre-market. So that's the reason why it's going to be very important that you are ready for volatility and things like that for Wednesday. But before that happens, before all of this CPI data drops, we have Tuesday coming, and that's the reason why the market tends to be very slow the day before. More than 80% of the time, the market's very slow, very sideways, not a whole lot happens before CPI. And sometimes, maybe the majority of the time, not always, but sometimes we see the market sell off at the very end of the day because individuals have uncertainty associated with CPI. When there is uncertainty, the market tends to sell off because we don't know what's going to happen. And for that reason, we may see some profit taking, some repositioning of funds. They exit some positions, they drag the market down, and just do things like that. There's a possibility of that. Not a guarantee though. But for the most part, I do believe it's going to be a very sideways day tomorrow. But there are some things you have to consider. So tomorrow at 6 o'clock a.m., which is going to be in the West Coast, which is about 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern time, or for New York time. I'm going to say these based off New York time because that's going to be the most important for the stock market. I want to make that clear. I'm not reading these numbers wrong. It's more like me just adjusting for New York time because it's very important to consider things in that time zone. That's the most important for the stock market. All right, so 6 a.m. for me is going to be 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern time tomorrow. We have Bullard speaking from the Fed, and this guy tends to be the most hawkish Fed speaker. When he speaks, the market tends to trade sideways or even drop. And most of the time, this guy is very hawkish. He talks about the Fed having to be restrictive and do things like that. Now, today, we had lots of Fed speakers that came out. The majority of them were actually being a little bit more hawkish. Even Bostic was a little bit more on the hawkish end. If you want more information about what they said, I actually released a video about this earlier on. So the video before this one, if you want more information on Bostic, that's going to be important too. But anyways, for Bullard, he's going to be speaking tomorrow. It's going to be important to consider what he says. Then at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern time, okay, in New York time, we have the economic optimism report coming out after the market opens. This is likely going to cause maybe a small surge in volatility, but nothing too massive. But so far, you have to consider that the economic optimism has been quite good for the markets. The markets and consumers are expecting inflation to cool off. We saw that in today's data with the consumer inflationary expectations report. We're expecting inflation to cool off and things to improve. So investors are going to likely react to this maybe in a somewhat positive manner. Then besides that, there's not really anything else dropping tomorrow. The market's just going to trade sideways, probably probably, excuse me, be kind of like choppy and just not really do anything too big. That's what I'm seeing really for tomorrow. But then don't forget, it's just getting ready for Wednesday, and we're going to see a much bigger move. Now, moving forward, I just want to remind you guys that we have Tuesday and Wednesday earnings. Nothing really big is dropping for them. But for Thursday and Friday, things become a lot more serious. We have Delta, Progressive, PepsiCo, and just a couple of others for Thursday. Then for Friday, we have JP Morgan Chase, we have Citigroup, we have Wells Fargo, we have BlackRock, and a bunch of other large institutions. They're going to cause a bigger move for the markets on Friday. We're going to react to these earnings. So make sure you are ready for this for Friday. It's going to be very, very important. Now, when it comes to Tesla, we have some very important things to consider. There's some news coming out about the Tesla Gigafactory in Mexico that could get its final permits any day now, according to many governmental officials over there. And I consider this some very, very good news because they are about to get close to moving to the construction phase. However, I just want to note that it's not confirmed yet. They don't have the official paperwork done just yet at the time I'm recording this. There was an article that said this, like right here. They're cleared to begin the Gigafactory Mexico construction. But if you read through the article, it says that the government said that they're just waiting for it and it will likely start construction very soon. So it's very likely they will eventually do this. This is what the Nuevo Leon government ended up saying. The governor over there basically said that. And it's basically true. Tesla will start a Gigafactory over there. We're just waiting for some more paperwork. It's not confirmed just yet that they're done. They're starting construction, but they're getting very close to it at the time I am recording this. Now, some more news came out right over here about what is going on with the EPA. They're basically suggesting, or at least Tesla's telling the EPA, that the US could go all electric by 2030, and it's going to settle for 69% of new sales. That is, once again, some very good news for Tesla, but it's not a guarantee because it's a relatively high number. And you have to remember there are lots of competitors coming in, and it's very hard to predict how the future is going to go. But that doesn't really change my opinion on Tesla because you have to consider that, like I told you guys in the morning, we got over 70,000, 74,000 specifically deliveries in China alone just in the month of June. You can't forget that we're seeing big growth in Europe going forward. We may see more gigafactories being built over there in either like Spain or France. And then on top of that, in the USA, Tesla's continuing to grow like crazy. We have this massive supercharger network. They're going to continue to grow. And more competitors, especially here in the USA, are adapting Tesla's new chargers. So that's very, very awesome. They're adapting to Tesla. And I consider that very, very bullish news. And I do agree that Tesla's going to have a big market share as years go on. Can I guarantee 69%? Not necessarily. I mean, it's a pretty interesting number, especially for Tesla. But once again, if it's the case, very, very bullish. Regardless of what it is, it's still going to be very good for them. I also wanted to add right over here that there was some news that was coming out about Tesla updates. Basically, Tesla's improving their products in almost every way, shape, and form possible. You can see the FSD is continuing to improve. They're getting more and more individuals to drive, testing everything out. And then on top of that, we're starting to see some more news about how they have a referral program. There's going to be even cash rewards in China. There is more talk somewhere in this article about how they're going to be improving their uses of cameras. They're going to be basically trying to get these important permits for them to improve the way in which they're collecting data and other things like this just continue to grow. So I saw a lot of talk about this for the new updates. That's bullish news for Tesla too for the longer term, and I can't wait for what the future holds for FSD. Anyways, when it comes to their total inventory levels, we are starting to see a slight increase in inventories over the weekend. Production is playing a role in this. Maybe they started producing a lot more cars than before, or it could also be that demand has slowed down just a tiny bit over the weekend. Not really that bad overall. I mean, the Model X was a little high. It is reaching these higher levels in inventory closer to like a 1,000, but everything else is relatively low, so it's still okay. But right now, it doesn't really matter that much because we're not really close to the end of the quarter. So we're going to have to wait and see how this goes going forward. I really hope that these continue to drop, but I just wanted to note that there is a fluctuation right now in their inventories. I want to see this eventually drop later on. Now, for the price price ratio, it's starting to curl a little bit, which means Tesla's losing some strength relative to the markets. And we clearly saw that today in the price action. Compared to SPY, Tesla underperformed, the same thing relative to the QQQ. And many analysts like Mizuho are saying to buy Tesla. So it's a pretty good piece of news. And besides that, Tesla got two more upgrades from Jefferies and another company. I think it was Morgan Stanley, which upgraded Tesla once again. But their targets were actually very close to where Tesla currently was because they had lower targets from before, which they just barely updated. So, besides that, I mean, it wasn't really that huge of a piece of news, but it didn't really help Tesla that much, but it's just worth noting. Then when it comes to the seasonality basis, Tesla tends to be green about 51% of the time on Tuesdays. We tend to not do too well in the month of July compared to June. We're already starting to see some signs of it. And don't forget, when it comes to hourly seasonality, we tend to do well during the second hour and also during the fourth hour of the day, with more volatility and more green during those times. So watch those hours, especially the fourth hour. That's typically when Tesla starts to just reverse a bit. 65% of the time we're green during the fourth hour. Just watch that hour very carefully if you are a trader or something like that. Also, during the first 2 hours, we see lots of volatility, of course, for the entire market, including Tesla. The short interest used to be at about 42 million shares being shorted just a few days ago. Now it's about at 34 million. It dropped just a little bit, so it's just worth noting. And finally, the volume on Tesla is starting to drop overall compared to what we saw from before. So Tesla is losing some volume, is dropping on low volume, which is still a pretty decent sign. That shows us that Tesla's not crashing very hard. We're not seeing immense, really intense selling pressure. We're getting moments of intense selling pressure during the mornings, but then the volume just slows down and Tesla starts to stagnate. And that's the reason why Tesla traded like this. So it didn't really sell off for the majority of the day. Tesla basically did this. It sold off, traded sideways a little bit, sold off a little bit more. And during these sell off periods, we saw a little bit more volume. But then after that, volume just slowed down for the second half of the day and it just didn't really do much. So volume is slowing down, which tends to be a sign that we're getting ready for a big surge in it later on, which could lead to more volatility in the future, possibly after CPI or after some other big events, such as its earnings in just about 9 days. Anyways, now let's talk about the share price. What's going on with Tesla? Well, I just want to note, let me just hide my drawings real quick. On the 30 minutes time frame, okay? Tesla's getting very close to filling this gap. But for confirmation of a potential gap fill, you need to see it break below 265. If that breaks, Tesla's going to likely fill the gap down here. However, today it looked like Tesla was trying to base around 265, so there's no guarantee that's going to happen. And we tend to be very sideways during CPI days. So I'm not really expecting too much for tomorrow. Did I say CPI? I meant the day before CPI days. Sorry about that, guys. But what I meant was we're likely going to see lots of boring price action for tomorrow because today Tesla was very tight at the very end of the day. We're likely going to see something like this for tomorrow. Now, the trend is Tesla tends to pump in the mornings. We're likely going to see Tesla try to pump to about 272 or so, something like that. We might see something like that. Then it may cool off as time goes on and just remain either sideways. And it's going to be very, very boring, just like how we saw it moving today, around this 268 area or something like that. And we have strong support at 265. But if there's a move down below 265, it could fill the gap to 262. Even if that happens, I expect Tesla to bounce off 262 and make its way right back up to 268 or so, or maybe a little bit lower, but something like that. So basically, I'm expecting maybe a pop in the open up a couple of dollars, maybe a retest of this 270 area, maybe 272 or so, maybe a little bit higher, but not too high. A rejection as the day goes on, Tesla to come down to 268 or so. It could drop a little lower. I don't know if it's going to break below 265 or so. Then it's going to come back and just trade very, very boring in a very choppy sideways manner because we're going to see a much bigger move later on after CPI. Now, historically, if CPI is decent, if we get a low CPI, that's not going to be everything. We also want to watch core, especially now because of what the Fed was saying. So core CPI is going to be CPI without food and energy being included. Watch both of those metrics. But I just want to note that I'm going to talk more about this tomorrow, but I just want to note in advance that we tend to do well after a decent CPI. And I think the odds favor a decent CPI and core being very close to expectations, if not at expectations, which means there's a good chance the market's going to try to rebound starting on Wednesday. I think it's a little bit more likely, but just to be safe, I will talk more about this later on. All right, so tomorrow, which is Tuesday, we might see sideways boring price action. For Wednesday, when CPI comes out, the odds do favor the market potentially bouncing, but not a guarantee, not promising it. You always have to be prepared for anything. I wanted to give you guys just a quick heads up on that. All right, so boring day for Tesla for tomorrow, most likely. Now I'm just going to briefly go over just a couple of others. I'm going to try to make this video kind of quick. SPY was stuck between 440 and 438 basically for almost all of today, just back and forth and back and forth. I think we're going to see this again for tomorrow. Very, very boring price action. If it breaks above 442, if we're very strong, then 440. If we break 440, then 442 is a possibility, but I don't really see it pumping that hard. If it breaks down, watch support at 439. If that fails us, watch 438, 437.5, and then 437 flat, and then 436, 436.64 so is going to come after that. I think this is just very boring and sideways, and we're going to see very much just sideways price action between these levels. We might pump a little bit above 440 tomorrow, maybe see like 440.5, maybe 441, sell off a little bit, back down to 440, back down to like 439, come right back up to 440, and then just trade sideways. But there is a possibility, I forgot to mention this, that we could sell off at the very last couple of minutes, last like 30 minutes or so, because the market sometimes sells off before CPI because of some profit taking, because people know that they can't be holding options overnight unless they want to risk holding through CPI, as CPI is going to come out before the market opens on Wednesday. So there's a risk of that. I just wanted you guys to be aware of that. But we're most likely going to get some very boring price action, lots of chop, lots of sideways price action for SPY as well. Same thing for Apple. It might pump up to like 189, maybe even 190, then reject off that, come right back down to 188, reject off that and come down, or actually break below that and see like 187.5 to 187, come right back up and close very flat. That's what I'm seeing for Apple. So Neo, the reason I'm calling this out is we have a bullish looking triangle on Neo. There's a chance it's going to try to push up for 11 very soon. It looks more bullish than bearish, but I think the overall market is going to cause it to trade sideways afterwards. So make it a pop to about 11, then trade sideways. Just wanted to note that. For the triple Q, same thing. I mean, it's going to probably be boring just like today. It didn't really do much. It might try to pop a little bit to about 367 to 368, somewhere between there. Then come right back down to 366. Maybe it drops a little bit lower to 364.69 or something like that. Then just come right back up. Basically, very boring sideways price action. I'm not really seeing too much. There is a possibility of a sell off at the end of the day, but not a guarantee. Basically, it's getting tight so it can make a big move. And let me show you what I mean by that. I forgot to show you guys this on SPY. So here's SPY. You could also do this with SPX. Look at the 4-hour time frame, for example, and then look at our Bollingers. You can notice that we basically have a tendency of becoming very tight before making a much larger move. My Bollingers are not showing for. Give me 1 second. Hopefully these show. There they are. Sorry about that, guys. Here they are. Okay, so basically, when we get very tight, like this moment right here, we tend to see a big expansion. This is because there's going to be a big surge in volatility. This typically happens when we get tight. So, like right here, we got tight. Let me zoom into it. We got really tight right here in terms of price action. Then we saw this big expansion. We got a little tight here, then we expanded. Got very tight here, then we expanded, and the same thing just keeps happening, right? So right here we got kind of tight around like the very end of June. Then we got this expansion. We got this nice push up, and now we're starting to get tight again. I think we're gonna get even tighter tomorrow. Boring chop. Then a big move is coming in either direction. Does not have to be the upside, it could be the downside too, just to be safe. But I just want to inform you guys about this. This is why the market's getting tight. It's preparing for something very, very volatile and something the Fed pays attention to. The Fed is going to adjust their policy, their monetary policy based off CPI and factors like that. That's why it's especially important now. It also affects our lives on a daily basis. For Nvidia, it might try to bounce and retest like 425, then come right back down to about 420 and just trade sideways for the majority of the day, not really do anything too big. Microsoft, same thing. The thing is, we have this imbalance. I was seeing an imbalance down here somewhere. We could see this thing come down to about this 325 area. It might drop a little bit more because it's very close to this imbalance. There's also one around like 324. I think that this thing might try to pop a little bit, then come right back down, maybe drop a little bit more as the trend's looking more bearish. We could see 325 being tested with imbalances, then bounce off that and just trade sideways. This could happen like over a day or so in the future, but overall, it may drop a little bit more, then bounce off like 325 and just close kind of flat, maybe a little bit in the red. It is looking a little bit more bearish though from a technical standpoint, so it may make a bigger move to the downside. AMD had bullish news involving Janet Yellen that came out. And notice how the market was dropping, right? It caused AMD to fall. And then this thing got a nice bounce intraday, a very beautiful looking bounce. We have a potential bullish setup that is developing on it. And we have that imbalance close to like the 118 area from what I remember. We might see this thing make its way up to 118 over the next couple of trading days. It is looking quite nice from a technical standpoint. The 5-minute was pretty decent. The 4-hour time frame is actually looking all right. It's getting very tight basically, and we could be seeing a big move soon. So right here we have this imbalance at like 118. I think it's going to make its way up to fill that imbalance. Before that happens, it might just trade sideways tomorrow between 113 and 111, then eventually break out. Same thing with Netflix. It's going to likely trade around like 440, just be very boring. Tomorrow could come down to like 435, bounce back up to like 440. And once again, just trade sideways before making a big move. And it's basically the same for the majority of the stocks out there. I mean, Coinbase, however, is looking a little bit more bullish despite that. I say that because it was trying to push up. There is a bearish divergence developing on it, but there's no signal of it breaking down. And this thing is continuing to make higher highs and higher lows, so there's no confirmation of anything. I think it might try to pop a little bit more. It's about this like 82 level, then reject, come down to like 77, and just trade sideways in a boring manner. Baba has more potential for upside because of a nice accumulation. There's like a nice cup and handle like formation. There's also this high at like 94.88, which is worth noting. And we had some bullish news involving a big deal and also Janet Yellen talking about how relations between the US and China are improving, which was some good news. We also saw a lot of Chinese tickers following this trend. So there's a good chance it might try to pop up to about 94 over the next couple of trading days. For Google, not a whole lot is going on. I just want to note that we have these imbalances down here, which is a little bit concerning for some investors. So like right here, you could see, let's see if I could find it. Like right here, we have this imbalance, which is where it went to. And there's also another one right about here, right here, around this like 112 area. It's also looking like we're forming a big distribution. So like right here when you zoom out, I know it's a little hard to see, but it's kind of like a head and shoulders distribution, how it's kind of like curling, right? Sometimes stocks do this when they turn more bearish. It is looking more bearish from a technical standpoint as of right now. So we're going to be watching these levels very carefully. If it breaks below the low it made at 116, it's going to likely come all the way down to the 113s. Now, if you're wondering what's going to happen for the longer term future of Google, here's my answer. Earnings is going to tell you everything. This thing could invalidate these technical setups and start pumping if we get a very strong earnings. That's going to determine how Google is doing. But you have to remember guidance is going to be important too. So even if they do well for earnings, if they tell us that, oh, a recession's coming, be prepared for this and that could also affect it big time. But the biggest thing for this company is going to be earnings. It's just a couple of weeks away. The same thing could be said for many different tech stocks out there if you are a long-term investor. And honestly, with Google, I'm very bullish for the longer term of this company nonetheless. There could be downside because of the potential recession that's coming. And if it drops, don't forget you can always buy those dips, especially in these lower levels. Now, from a technical standpoint, it's looking like this distribution phase is developing a head and shoulders like pattern. And on the daily chart, I just want to note that on the daily chart, it's looking a little bit more bearish too. If you look at this trend, it's starting to retest this low. So it could be forming a double bottom and try to bounce off 116, or it could just continue to break down. So 116 is a very important level. If it breaks down, you're going to be watching this 115 support. We also had those imbalances close to about like the 112 area. We have this like unfilled gap, which is acting as a magnet. So if 116 breaks, it's most likely going to come down to like 112. So there could be more downside coming for Google. It is looking more bearish from a technical standpoint, in my opinion. So I just want to note, if you are a long-term investor, there could be more dip buying opportunities. And also, don't forget that what's going to be very impactful for this stock is going to be the big CPI report, and then don't forget about earnings, which is dropping over the next couple of weeks. That's going to determine if it comes all the way back down to like 100 flat, which could be a much better dip buying opportunity, or even like the 90s, or if this thing gets a very nice bounce, it starts pushing above 130. So just be prepared. You could buy at like these levels and just continue to dollar cost average down as a very easy strategy. But always remember to not go all in. Just buy in slowly, not financial advice, by the way. Buy in slowly, 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 slowly. And as it drops more, just have more cash aside. Just keep buying and buying and buying. And your average is going to drop like by a lot more. But what do I see for the company? I'm still very bullish for the long term. For the short term, the recession could lead to more volatility. And what's going to determine how it moves is going to be earnings and also what they announce for guidance. Okay. So watch Google carefully. For Amazon, same thing is going on. I mean, it's basically the same thing as what I said for Google. We have a potential head and shoulders looking like a distribution phase. And we have these imbalances down here. So we're going to be watching them very carefully to see how Amazon does. Now, let me add that I was talking to you guys about how Amazon was looking kind of bearish yesterday. If it got confirmation and a break below this level, we'd see it come all the way down to about this like 25 area. So we're going to be watching the 30-minute time frame. Where is the next imbalance? I think it was down here around 125. We came very close to it. If that breaks, watch 123. I don't think Amazon is super bearish though, because it dropped quite nicely and it's trying to hold and try to base around where this imbalance was. So we could see it drop a little bit more, maybe to 125 and then try to bounce, or it could try to hold this level by tomorrow. And I'm thinking that's going to try to hold up a little bit and eventually try to make its way up to this next imbalance that formed around this 129 area. So I think it's going to trade sideways for some time and then potentially even rebound over the next couple of trading days, if not after a week. That's what I'm seeing for Amazon. I just want to add that this thing will most likely make a much bigger move once earnings comes out. So be ready for that anyways. So what do I see happening? Maybe a little bit more downside. It could retest like 125 flat, then bounce, or just trade sideways from here and not really do much and then bounce later on. I'm going to be watching for a bounce potentially to this imbalance. And then we'll see what happens with the earnings over the next couple of weeks. Meta is looking quite resilient. It came down to our target. I talked about 287 yesterday on Meta. Do you guys remember that? And I told you that if that broke, could come down to like 285 or it could bounce. If anything, it's trying to hold in this range. It's still stuck. It's still trying to hold above 290. It's showing lots of signs of strength, lots of buyers stepping in. I'm going to be watching. Could it hold above 292 and then 290 for tomorrow? If 290 breaks, we're going to be watching 287 and 285. If it manages to break to the upside, watch 295, 298, and 300 as resistances. What do I think is going to happen? I think it's just going to trade sideways, really, to be honest with you guys. I'm not seeing too much for tomorrow specifically, but the big move will come after CPI. All right, so that's what I have for this video. I'm not expecting too much for the markets. Lots of sideways price action, maybe a sell-off at the very end of the day. I'm not too sure about that. Just lots of boring sideways price action, then a much bigger move after CPI. For Tesla, it's going to likely either be stuck in this range or maybe drop a little bit more depending on how it reacts to 265. And then I do think there's a good chance it may bounce after CPI, but just to be safe, we'll have to wait and see on the numbers specifically. But I'm just telling you what I predict is going to happen, just where I'm leaning towards. Always remember to watch for confirmations just to be safe and do what you have to do to manage risks and be a very good trader based off what the chart tells you, not just what you are guessing or speculating or doing anything like that. All right. Thank you for listening. Have a good one, everyone. Tesla to the moon is the long term is still right. And don't forget, nothing I say is financial advice in any way, shape, or form. All right, guys, have a good one. Tesla in the market to the moon, and peace out.